بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So in our last week's lesson, I had stopped at the point where the people had surrounded Uthman ibn Affan's house. The protesters had surrounded and they had demanded one of three things. They said that number one, you either resign and you hand over the position. To whom they did not say. Number two, that you must willingly give yourself up so that qisas be done on you because you attempted murder. Okay, so what was the murder charge? Remember what was the murder charge? The letter that you wanted to kill all of us, and this is in dhulm. So you give yourself up, and the Islamic Sharia is then basically applied, and you have qisas. Or number three, they said that you leave it up to us and we will fight you even unto death. So Uthman ibn Affan refused to do any of these things. He did not want to surrender, and he did not, obviously, he didn't deserve the death penalty, as he himself said multiple times. Why would they, on what basis are they going to kill me? And as I said, that this 30 to 40 days that he was surrounded by the siege, the fact of the matter is we only have reports here and there. We have to piece it together what exactly happened. And during this time, a number of reports tell us that a number of negotiations took place between Uthman and the people around him. And for example, sometime during this siege, perhaps at the beginning, one of the people entered in and demanded from Uthman that he hand himself over to basically be executed. And Uthman said, on what basis are you fighting me? And this young man said, Allah says in the Quran, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. Permission has been given to those who have been wronged that they fight, and Allah is indeed capable of helping them. And you have wronged us, and so we are fighting you. أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. Right? So because dhulm has been done to us, we are now allowed to fight you. So he used this ayah of the Quran as an evidence. And Uthman said, I know exactly when that ayah came and to whom it was revealed. This ayah came because the Quraysh were persecuting us, and Allah gave us permission to wage jihad against them. And this is the first verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, the first verse that Allah Azza wa Jal allowed jihad. And this is the characteristic of the Khawarij from the very beginning. They take a verse that is meant for the believers, the Sahaba, and they apply it in an incorrect interpretation. And this is, to this day, this radical strands and these jihadist militant groups, to this day, they take these verses out of context. And again, the irony, this they say it was a shab, a young man. This young man has never met the Prophet, has never heard the Quran recited directly from him, and he assumes that he knows the Quran better than Uthman ibn Affan. And during these 30 to 40 days, Uthman ibn Affan multiple times mentioned some of his blessings, and honestly you cannot help but feel sadness and pity that Uthman had to negotiate with these protesters by reminding them of his own blessings. And again, we don't know exactly when each of these incidents occurs, but we know that during this month, multiple times he addressed the people around his house. At times he mentioned the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ climbing Uhud with Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman. And he reminded them that I was there, and the Prophet ﷺ said this. At times he reminded them of the Prophet ﷺ telling him after he financed the Battle of Tabuk, that Wallahi ma darra Uthman ma fa'ala ba'da al-yawm, that you are criticizing me for all of these points, but do you know that the Prophet ﷺ said in the Battle of Tabuk that doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to be worthy of criticism. Who are you to criticize when the Prophet ﷺ has basically given me that open check that no matter what Uthman does, it will not harm him? How can you be now qualified to criticize after this? And it is even said that he reported, go ask so and so and so and so, they were there at the time, and these were Sahaba that were there when the Prophet ﷺ said this. Go and ask them that the Prophet ﷺ said this. As well, he told them that when the time came, so as I had mentioned, that initially the protesters surrounded the house. We don't know exactly when. In the beginning, it was just protesting so that he could leave and he could come out. Eventually they stopped him from leaving, but visitors would come in. Eventually they stopped the visitors from coming in. And then eventually they even stopped food and water from being delivered to his house, right? And again, we don't have a timeline. There's no way, there's no detailed timeline. And perhaps there were times where even food and water was not allowed, then some was allowed to come in. So perhaps it was back and forth. But we know that there were times where there was no permission given for Uthman to go to the masjid. During that time, he addressed them while they were in the masjid from his house. And this demonstrates that his house was within hearing distance of the masjid. Maybe 20 feet, 30 feet, maybe even 40 feet, but with a loud voice you could hear. And he tells them that the very place that you are praying inside the Masjid al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I was the one who purchased it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, who shall purchase it and he shall have Jannah. Remember we talked about the blessings of Uthman. And one of the blessings, one of the last things that he did in the life of the Prophet ﷺ was that he expanded the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ towards the eastern, towards the north, south, eastern side of the Rawdah. So he purchased that, the back part of the Rawdah, and he purchased it. And that was the area of the masjid that was closest to his house anyway. And the people were praying there, and he called out to them that, do you not know that that very place that you're not allowing me to pray, I cannot pray, I was the one who purchased it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, who shall purchase this? He shall get Jannah. So again, we have these snippets here. I cannot make the whole story, unfortunately, for you, but we have these snippets. And another very sad snippet that we have is that when they prevented water from being delivered to his house, he said, how can you deprive me of water when I was the one who gave the Muslims water and I purchased Bi'r Ruma for them? How can you, what right do you have to deprive water from me when I was the one who purchased Bi'r Ruma for them? So all of these snippets throughout these 30, 40 days, unfortunately he is having to remind these ruffians, these riffraff, of the status that the Prophet ﷺ said that he had. And according to Ibn Sa'd, the famous historian, at one point he told them, he predicted that, O people, do not kill me, for by Allah I am a brother and a leader. I'm a Muslim and I'm also an appointed leader, and I only want what is best. In uridu illa al-islah mastata'. This is an ayah of the Quran, and it is upon the tongue of the Prophet Salih alayhi salam that he says, In uridu illa al-islah mastata'. I only want to do what is best as much as I can. And Shu'aib alayhi salam, and also isn't it Hud? Two of them have the same thing. And Uthman says, I only want what is best. Don't criticize me. Whether I am right or wrong, I only want what is good, meaning my niyyah is good. Even if you disagree with my policies, I only want what is good for the ummah. وَلَئِنْ قَتَلْتُمُونِي. But if you kill me, then you shall never be a jama'ah together again. Nor shall you fight behind one flag again. Nor shall you ever divide the ghanima together again. Meaning, my death will be the end of the unity of the ummah. So he predicted this for the people around him, and he said that, I beg you not to kill me, not for my sake, for the sake of the ummah. That your killing of me shall lead to the beginning of the end for the ummah. And Al-Hasan al-Basri, was a teenager who was in Medina at the time. Al-Hasan al-Basri is a live witness to what is going on. Meaning he's in Medina, but he's probably 15, 17 years old. He's just a young teenager. And so he's come from Basra, and he is in Medina, and he is seeing firsthand. Of course, he's too young to even do anything on either side. He's just a young child, young man at the time. But he is an eyewitness, Hasan al-Basri. He's an eyewitness. You've all heard of Hasan al-Basri, the famous tabi'i, perhaps the most famous tabi'i of ever. And he died 110 hijrah. This is now 35 hijrah, right? So he is a very young man, and he is in Medina at the time when all of this is happening. And Hasan al-Basri remarks, more than 50 years, 60 years later, he says, Sadaqa Uthman. Uthman spoke the truth. For wallahi, even though we prayed together after him, our hearts were never united after that. So Uthman radiallahu anhu predicted that his death would be the beginning of the end of the ummah, and that is exactly what happened. When the siege began, Uthman ibn Affan, as we said, he was allowed to leave, and visitors were allowed to come to his house. And a number of meetings took place about what should be done with these protesters. And Uthman ibn Affan called a number of Sahaba, at times individually, at times as a group, and asked them what is to be done. And of the first of the Sahaba he reached out to was Abdullah ibn Salam. And Abdullah ibn Salam is now a very, very elderly man. He was, of course, he has witnessed everything from the beginning of Medina. He is one of the leaders of the city of Medina, because he goes back to pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah as one of the leaders. He was the chief rabbi of the Yahud before the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. So he is now a Madani, through and through. And he is now one of the senior people of the city. And he asked Abdullah ibn Salam, what is your advice, what should I do? And Abdullah ibn Salam said that keep your hands down, keep your hands shackled to yourself, for that will be the best excuse in the eyes of Allah. You will be the victor. Don't raise your hand up, keep it down, and that will be the best excuse in the eyes of Allah. And I already told you what Ibn Umar and others advised him, that for how long will you live? What is the point? Suppose they were to attack, what will be the case? What will be the max? They will kill you. Suppose you get rid of them, how will you live forever? So if death is inevitable, die the best death without having killed anybody. And many of the Sahaba dedicated themselves or suggested to the Uthman that they would be willing to protect Uthman personally. And of them is Al-Harith ibn Nu'man, that he said, give us the command and we shall fight them. And Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, one of the senior of the Sahaba, Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, he said, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, you have the numbers and the quantity on your side, and you are on the side of the truth, and they are upon the batil. You have the numbers and the quantity. Give us the command and we'll fight for the truth against them. But Uthman said that phrase that was to become his motto throughout all of this 30, 40 days. He would always repeat the same phrase over and over again. I shall not be the first person after the Prophet ﷺ to shed the blood of a Muslim. It's not going to go down that I am the first person in my watch, and because of me, that Muslim blood was shed. So he insisted that none of the Sahaba would basically defend him physically, and they obeyed him until the very end. And of those who was of the elite, of the vanguard of defending Uthman ibn Affan, was Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, who is at the prime now of his manhood. Of course, eventually he will become his own Khalifa. Eventually he will not take allegiance with the Umayyads, and he will consider the Umayyads to be a tyrannical, un-Islamic entity, and he will form his own Khilafah in Mecca and Medina. That's going to happen later on. We'll come to it when we get to it. Right now he is in the formative period. He's in his 30s right now, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr now says to Uthman ibn Affan that uqtuluhum, go ahead and fight them and kill them, for by Allah we have Allah's permission to defend and fight on your behalf. Meaning, the Sharia has given you the green light. You are surrounded, they are depriving you of food and water, they might even kill you. You have every Islamic right to go and fight them. And others of the Sahaba said that you have enough defenders and supporters, just give us permission. But he kept on saying that anshudukum lillah, I beg you in the name of Allah to not shed any blood for my sake. So that was the mantra, that was the standard slogan of Uthman ibn Affan: no blood will be spilt because of me. I will not give the command to kill any person. There was also an idea, some say Usama ibn Zayd was the one who suggested it, and perhaps other Sahaba as well. There was also an idea that he be secretly smuggled out and he flee to Mecca. So this idea was also suggested, that he should just basically leave surreptitiously and be smuggled to a safe zone. But he turned this idea down as well, because obviously it's not really the manly thing to do. It's not, this is not appropriate for Uthman ibn Affan to simply disappear and run away. And he refused to take that idea as well. And during this time when the affairs of the Ummah now are stopped, he appointed Abdullah ibn Zubayr to take charge of the affairs of the Ummah while he is now under siege, so that the Ummah, whatever needs to be done outside is still being done. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr becomes the temporary in charge of the other affairs. And he also delegated Ibn Abbas to lead the Hajj, because this is Dhul Hijjah of 35 Hijrah. And he's not able to go for Hajj, and the senior Sahaba are stuck. But there's still going to be pilgrims coming from other lands. Somebody has to take charge of the Hajj. So he appoints Ibn Abbas to take charge of the Hajj. And this shows to the very end that he is delegating responsibilities, that he is taking care of what he's supposed to take care of. Despite the fact that he is almost going to die, despite the fact that he's threatened, he is in charge of responsibilities, and he delegates others to take charge of those responsibilities. And at this stage, we can tell from his statements that he still felt there was hope, that he felt that they could be negotiated with, and that when they did threaten him, that he initially was shocked at the level of anger and the level of threats taking place. And as already mentioned, the first time the threats came, perhaps the first week of the protest, that Uthman radiallahu anh came back and his face was pale, the blood had drained from his face, and he said to his family, "Haddaduni," they threatened to kill me by Allah, but for what crime can they possibly kill me? Which means what? That he wasn't expecting the anger and the mob mentality to get to that level. But this is now already taking place, so what's going to happen towards the end? And a time came when visitors, and especially prominent visitors, could not visit him. So we learn from Ibn Sa'd's Tarikh, Tabaqat. Ibn Sa'd has a famous book called Tabaqat. It's one of the earliest books of history, and it's of the biographies of the Sahaba and whatnot. We learn that he asked for Ali ibn Abi Talib to come, specifically Ali ibn Abi Talib to come. And Ali went with some of his family members. We don't know who of his family members at this time, and realized that Ali had more sons and daughters, because now Fatima has passed away more than 20 something years ago, and he has married after the death of Fatima. When did Fatima die? 6 months after the Prophet ﷺ. So after the death of Fatima, Ali remarried, and he had other children from other women. So it is simply says he went with some of his family, who we don't know. It could be Muhammad ibn al-Hanafi, it could be others, we don't know. So he went with some of his family, and the protesters refused to let him in. And they stood up to try to physically prevent, and the matter became more and more, until his family, it said, who they were we don't know, begged him to go back before he himself was harmed. So the situation is getting so tense that Ali himself radiallahu anh cannot go inside the house of Uthman. So what did he do? He took off his turban. In those days, people recognized people's turbans, especially the senior Sahaba. They had their turbans that people recognized. He took off his turban and he flung it over the crowd to the doorstep of Uthman, where Uthman's, he would obviously have the khadam or the servants are there in the house. So they took it inside. The point meaning, Ali is expressing his support for Uthman, that I tried to come. You called me, I tried to come, I'm not able to come, so whatever token like I can support you with, this is my turban at your service. And these types of incidents, and there are so many in number, clearly demonstrate the ludicrous notion that Ali radiallahu anhu was sympathetic to the killers. It's really nonsensical. Over and over again we can see Ali radiallahu anhu is not on the side of the killers, astaghfirullah. Rather, he is defending Uthman from the very beginning. And at one point, Ka'b ibn Malik, we all know Ka'b ibn Malik, we had a whole lesson about Ka'b ibn Malik. At one point in the siege, Ka'b ibn Malik gathers together the Ansar. He goes to their houses, he gathers together the Ansar, and he marches with them to the house of Uthman, and he says, he gets inside the house, he says that, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, we are the Ansar, and we shall show you that we are Ansar. What does Ansar mean? The helpers. And he says, we shall be the Ansar of Allah again as we were the Ansar of Allah before. And Zayd ibn Thabit, also from the Ansar and from this delegation, Zayd ibn Thabit said that Nasarna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wal ana nansuruka. We were the people who helped Rasulullah, now we will help you as well. So Zayd ibn Thabit and Ka'ab ibn Malik and others of the senior of the Ansar are physically now willing to fight on behalf of Uthman. And Uthman once again says to them, I do not want any fighting. Do not, get rid of the crowds or protests, and go back and do not physically engage with them. And at some point in time, and again, that's the sad reality, we don't have a timeline, we have to reconstruct. At some point in time, the Sahaba became so worried about the safety of Uthman that many of them volunteered to live in the house with him. They slept in the main room and they became his personal bodyguards for the last few days of his life. Radiallahu an. And people like Abu Hurairah and Abdullah ibn Umar and Al-Hassan ibn Ali and others of the senior Sahaba actually moved into the house of Uthman and stayed there physically for the last few days because of the tense situation and scenario. And as well, Al-Marwan ibn al-Hakam, who is his cousin. And that also shows it doesn't make sense for Marwan to have forged the letter. Now he's clearly willing to lose his life. He's willing to fight to defend Uthman. It makes no sense to accuse him of forging the letter, right? That's what some of the medieval historians said. And these are not from the other group. These are from our own group. Some of our own scholars said it's most likely Marwan. But if you really think about it, there doesn't seem to be a motive. There doesn't seem to be, it just doesn't match up that Marwan will be the one forging the letter. And right now we have him inside the house, armed to the hilt, willing to defend Uthman to the death. How can Marwan then be the one who forged the letter? Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So he is with Abu Hurairah, with Abdullah ibn Umar, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr then sends a letter to him, or a messenger to him. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr is the one who has been appointed to be in charge of the affairs of the city and of the state while Uthman is under siege. And Ibn Zubayr says, if you want, I can also join that group to protect you. And if you want, I can remain where I am, and I have a group under my command that are willing to obey me at any time. Meaning, you have two options. O Amir al-Mu'mineen, I can also join the elite guard inside by myself, or I have a group of fighters basically that are under my command, and whenever you need, we will have a whole group willing to defend. And this also shows therefore that there were groups of the Sahaba that had prepared themselves in case there was fighting, that they would defend, but they weren't physically inside of the house of Uthman. So Uthman sent the messenger back thanking Abdullah ibn Zubayr and saying, if you come here, you will just be one more person in the crowd. Stay where you are, and that will be more beneficial. Don't come with your entire group until we need you. And multiple times during the siege, the situation became so tense that some of the Sahaba tried their best to defend even without the permission of Uthman. And especially amongst them was Abdullah ibn Umar and Al-Hassan ibn Ali. These two, and the both of them were of a young age, and Al-Hassan is younger than Ibn Umar, but they're both in their, Al-Hassan ibn Ali would now be 30 years old, around a little bit 30, late 20s, early 30s, and Ibn Umar would be early 30s. They're both basically at the prime, and these two attempted multiple times to get Uthman permission to go attack the protesters outside. And in fact, it is narrated that Ibn Umar came one time armed with his body armor, with his suit of the cloak of armor on, and with his weapons, and he came to Uthman, and he asked Uthman that let him go out and fight. And the same for Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, it is reported that Abu Hurairah as well came to Uthman armed to this hilt. And Abu Hurairah is not a young man. Abu Hurairah by now must be around 60 years old. And Abu Hurairah is coming, and he is also armed to the hilt, and he is saying, now is the time to fight. How long are you going to not fight? So this shows this is towards the end of the siege, and a number of Sahaba are attempting to prompt Uthman by doing what? By coming already armed and saying, let us go fight. So Uthman said to Abu Hurairah that, would you be happy if you killed me and all of humanity? And Abu Hurairah said, of course not. So then Uthman said, and didn't Allah say in the Quran, what does Allah say? Whoever kills one person, it is as if he has killed all of humanity. فَقَأَنَّمَا قَتَلَ النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. So this is Uthman's slogan. How can you kill anybody? If you kill one person, it's as if you've killed me and all of humanity. How can you do this? So he managed to calm down Ibn Umar and Abu Hurairah, and nobody was able to basically defend Uthman because Uthman insisted on it. And the point, of course, arises that why was he so adamant about not fighting back? Why was he so adamant? And our scholars say that perhaps there were a number of reasons. First and foremost was the knowledge that the Prophet himself had directly given him, that he is going to die a shaheed, and that he will be suffering certain problems at the hands of zalim people. Remember, there was a hadith we quoted at the beginning when we talked about Uthman ibn Affan. We mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ said that you're going to be tested, there's going to be balwa tusibuhu, there's going to be issues taking place. Also, because the Prophet ﷺ explicitly told him, Allah will give you a shirt and others will try to snatch it away. When they try to snatch it away, do not give them that shirt. And Uthman understood clearly that now this is what's happening. And as well, because, and this was his main point that he verbalized, he did not want to be the one who began to shed the blood of the ummah. He did not want to go down in history, in legacy, meet Allah on the Day of Judgment, to be the first Muslim who commanded the shedding of another Muslim's blood. We realize this never happened Abu Bakr Umar's time, and throughout Uthman's time there has never been a battle between the Muslims, and it is unheard of at this point in time. Unfortunately, we all have heard of it all the time. We still see multiple Muslim nations fighting other Muslim nations, and in fact throughout all of our lives this has always been happening, and it will always happen. It's one of the realities of the qatl of Uthman. We are still suffering from the consequences of Uthman's massacre to this day, because that's what the predictions are. When this door is broken, it will never be shut again. When this door is broken, it will never be shut again. So the reason why Uthman refused to undertake any course of action was because he realized this was the only way. Even if it meant his death, there's nothing else to be done. And as well, there's a beautiful hadith in Musnad Imam Ahmad that demonstrates how difficult this time was, that our Prophet ﷺ predicted or said, there are 3 trials. Whoever has been saved from these 3 trials has been saved from everything. What are the worst 3 trials that mankind or the Muslim ummah will face? The worst 3. Well, number 1 is, before the Dajjal, is the death of the Prophet ﷺ. That's one of the worst trials. And was it not one of the worst? What happened to the Muslim ummah? More than half of the tribes broke away, became murtad again, because that was there. Even the Sahaba went through a phase of difficulty. This was one of the worst trials. Dajjal is another one. And then the third one, the Prophet ﷺ said, and the killing of a Khalifa. The killing of a Khalifa who is patient and clinging to the truth. So one of the biggest fitnas the ummah will undergo is the killing of an innocent Khalifa, even as this Khalifa sticks to the truth, clinging to the truth. And this is understood. There was no other Khalifa in our history that was as pious as Uthman and who was massacred, who was assassinated in that manner. Right? That he is literally clinging to the truth as others are attempting to fight him. Of course, many were the khulafa who were killed and died later on. How can you compare that to Uthman? And Uthman was a blatant assassination. It was not like one person. It was a mob assassination, which did not occur to Ali or to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhum ajma'in. So The reason Uthman did not do anything was because that was the only course of option, is not to fight them. And it appears as well that there were some physical altercations between the Sahaba and between the protesters, but none of them resulted in the death of anybody. But blood was spilled. People were wounded, but nobody actually died. We know from one report that at some stage, and we don't know any details of why or whatnot, at some stage 3 or 4 of the Sahaba were severely wounded. And of them was Marwan ibn al-Hakam, the cousin, and Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr, and Al-Hasan ibn Ali, the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Al-Hasan. In fact, Al-Hasan was wounded so severely that he had to be carried out on a stretcher, bleeding. So some type of altercation takes place. Most likely this is now in the last week, where they might have attempted to storm, or they might have done something, and some of the Sahaba might had to have defended, and then some type of fight broke out. The fight did not result in anybody's death, but the blood was spilt. And finally, things are going to come to an end, and that ending is that Uthman ibn Affan will now resign his fate. And how did this resigning of the fate come about? The night before his death, it is authentically reported in mutawatir narrations, literally out of all of the fitna, all of the reports of the killing of Uthman, this one incident is the one that is reported in literally at least 20 different books. So many different chains. That the night before Uthman's assassination, he saw the Prophet ﷺ in a dream. This was the last night of his life. He saw the Prophet ﷺ in a dream, and with him were Abu Bakr and Umar, waiting for him. They were all dressed and waiting for him. Good clothing and the Jannah clothing, and waiting for him. And the Prophet ﷺ said to Uthman ibn Affan, "O Uthman, break your fast with us. Aftir indana. Break your fast with us." So Uthman woke up, and the first thing he did, he ate suhoor. Because he realized, this is it now. This is it. This is going to be my day. And he fasted on that day, and he told his wife, and his wife's name was Naila. And Naila, by the way, was a Christian who had converted to Islam. Aisha had given her da'wah and she had converted to Islam, and she is the last of the wives of Uthman. And he told his wife Naila that today I will meet al-ahibba, my beloved ones. Today I will meet the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr and Umar. And of course, I mean, his wife said, no, don't speak like this. I mean, that's standard love. That's what happens when that's not going to happen. But Uthman had said to his wife, this is it now. This is what's going to happen. And this was on a Friday, the 12th of Dhul Hijjah in the year 35 AH. Friday, the 12th of Dhul Hijjah in the year 35 AH. And when he wakes up, of course, the Sahaba are still sleeping in the room. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Hasan ibn Ali, they're all sleeping in the room. And we do not know how, but he managed to get them all out of the house and back to their houses. We don't know, the books of history don't tell us what he said to them. But whatever he said, he managed to get them out of his house. And Allah knows best, but I mean, maybe he used the excuse of Jumu'ah. That look, today is Jumu'ah, they're not going to do anything. You go pray and then come back. Allah knows best. I mean, we don't know the details. But he managed to get every single one of his bodyguards that were volunteering. These were not professional bodyguards. These were the Sahaba that had volunteered. He managed to get all of them out. And this is early morning Friday. And now he resigned himself to his fate, and he accepted the inevitable, and he realized that his death was going to come, because it's been around 30 to 40 days now, and the situation has gone from bad to worse to really unbelievable. And there's no doubt in my mind, and it's clear from anybody who understands Uthman ibn Affan, he wanted the others to get out of the house so that nothing happens to them. Because he has been told, you're going to die today. I mean, the Prophet has told him in a dream. So he doesn't want any other Sahabi in the house. He doesn't want anybody to die other than himself, which is exactly what happened. Not a single person died on that day other than Uthman. And he insisted to get rid of all of the Sahaba. How he did it, I mean, truly, he must have been extremely forceful. He must have used the same, you want to call it emotional blackmail, but it is the reality. Like he basically said, by the rights Allah has given me, he's done this before. That I am the one you have to obey as the Khalifa, you cannot fight them. That's what he's been saying. That as your leader, you cannot disobey me. I ask you in the name of Allah. So whatever he did, he got rid of all of them. And this is on the Friday morning, the morning of the Friday. His house is now empty of anybody except for his wife Naila, who is in the chambers. That's it. Everybody else has gone. And he actually opens up the door after everybody has gone. And they've seen all of the Sahaba leave. He opens up the door and he sits down and opens up the Mus'haf, resigning himself to death. Because now he knows this is what's going to happen now. And he begins to recite, and the books of history mention again a few anecdotes, a few incidents, even of the very end. Unfortunately, we don't have a timeline who amongst that crowd is going to report, the details. All that we know is that it was only a matter of time before the people outside realized that the house is completely empty, that the Sahaba have left, and this is the time now to act. They've been outside 30, 40 days. The mob mentality has taken them over, and small groups began to come in until everybody now is inside of his room, and they began to manhandle him, they began to mock him, they shout him, they surround him, they hold on to his beard, which was something that they did as a matter of disrespect, to hold on to somebody and to mock him and whatnot. And finally it is said the first person to physically hit him was a person by the name of Ruman al-Yamani. He raised a long stick and basically put it down on Uthman ibn Affan, and that opened up the door for the others to basically come and literally, subhanAllah, I mean, Uthman at the time is 82 years old. He's not wearing anything other than the shirt, no armor, he has no weapons on him. I mean, what type of mentality must you be to surround an 82-year-old man who is one of the greatest of the Sahaba? I mean, wallahi, you just try to visualize and you cannot even see what type of people this must be to do this. And they are mocking and whatnot. And finally, it is said that one of them raised up a sword and he lowered it on Uthman. And this is human fitrah. I mean, even to the end, you're not going to commit suicide by letting them kill you. He puts his hand up to the very end, because this is Islam. Unlike what the suicide bombers do, you don't just sit there even as you know you're going to die. Still, you put up a fight back. He put his hand up, and that's when his hand got cut off. And this is the famous story that is reported in many early books, that the blood spurted onto the Mus'haf. This is the famous story, it's true. It spurted onto the Mus'haf, and it came onto the verse, فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ, that Allah will take care of them for you. Allah is enough for you. He will deal with them. فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ. That's that famous incident that took place where the blood of Uthman came upon the Mus'haf. And it is said that even as he saw his hand cut off, he said, woe to you, that was the first hand that wrote the Quran down. Meaning the first scribe of the Prophet ﷺ. The first scribe, because in Mecca, who could read and write? In Mecca, you had barely 5 people who could read and write. And Uthman was one of the first to write down the Quran. And with that hand now, he has now been basically, his hand has been cut off. And of course, the famous story as well took place here that Naila, his wife, was screaming from behind, and she attempted to protect Uthman as well. And as she stuck her hand out to stop the blow, so her entire hand as well, this is another blow, cuts her hand off. So she was without her 5 digits for the rest of her life, because it was cut off completely by one of the blows. And multiple blows are coming until it is said that the final blow that came to the head of Uthman, or the neck of Uthman, was from Jibla, was his name, Jibla, which was the name given in the books. And he was a large, dark man from Egypt who finished the dastardly deed. And this was the basically the death of Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anh. Now, we have to pause and go into a very difficult tangent here, a very awkward tangent. And again, it's better you hear it from me than from other people. This has always been my philosophy, not to sugarcoat and not to hide anything, but to rather explain it if possible, or tell you the truth, or say it's not authentic, whatever it is, but it's rather better that you hear it from me than from other people. One of the most difficult things for us to understand is that some of the people who were amongst the critics of Uthman seem to have been from noble families. And perhaps the most noble-blooded critic was Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. This is a very problematic issue. And again, perhaps in a previous generation, in another time and place, it would have been nice to simply overlook this and move on. But the world that we live in, you cannot keep secrets anymore. And if you don't hear it from me, you're going to hear it from other people, and their interpretations are going to be much more sinister than the truth. So it's better that this is heard from me. Now, who is Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr? And out of all of the people in the crowd, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr is the one that has the highest lineage. The majority of them have nothing to do with the Sahaba. The majority of them are the riffraff and the ruffians from the various places. Apparently, one of them was Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. And Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, there are even allegations. Some books say that he was of those who participated in the actual killing, but we will say that's not true. We'll say that's not true, and we'll explain why. Who is Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr? Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr is the youngest son of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and his mother is Asma binti Umays, and he was born in Hajjatul Wada', during the Hajjatul Wada', and he was simply too young to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So technically he's not a Sahabi. Technically he's not a Sahabi. He could not have seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a young boy. It's because Hajjatul Wada', think about it. And as I said, there is a category of people, we give them some respect overall, but we don't call them Sahaba. And these are those who were born to the Sahaba, and they would have seen the Prophet ﷺ, or the Prophet would have seen them. So Marwan is a much higher level of this category, because Marwan would have seen the Prophet ﷺ as a 6-7-year-old boy. But Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr would not have seen him. So he is not a Sahabi. And that's very important to make sure that people understand. He is not a Sahabi. Because how could he be when he's literally less than a year old when the Prophet ﷺ passes away? Okay? As well, another twist in the tale, remember Asma. Who is Asma? Asma binti Umays. She is Ja'far's wife, and then she is Abu Bakr's wife, then Ali's wife. And you're forgetting one more, but anyway, these are the three main ones. Ja'far, and then Ali, and then Abu Bakr. She married one after the other, Asma binti Umays, and she has children from all of them, by the way. So she had married Abu Bakr, so Muhammad is born to her. After Abu Bakr, she marries Ali. So Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr is raised in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Now, by the way, pause here. This is enough to indicate the lie that there was a tension between Ali and Abu Bakr, because he's raising the son of Abu Bakr. And Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, his loyalty was to Ali throughout his life. So much so that in the battle of the camel, he was on the side of Ali and his sister was on the other side. Because his sister was on the other side, right? So because he's been raised in the house of Ali, and he views Ali as the father figure in his life because he's been raised in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So some books, and especially the books that are non-Sunni, but even, and I want to be frank here, sometimes even some of our sources, they mention that Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr was of those who had participated in the killing of Uthman. And it is also reported that he suffered a difficult death, somewhat of a punishment death by the people. Allah knows what his fate will be in the akhirah, in that the early Umayyads killed him because he was a participant in the Battle of Uthman, and they also did things to his body that, again, no need to go into all the sordid details, but his death was not a positive one. He died a young man. He died actually 2 years after this. The Umayyads came to power, and then eventually they got rid of him. They literally killed him, and they weren't very kind with his body, with the claim that he was of those who killed Uthman. And he was of the most prominent who killed Uthman. Now, there is this version of events, but the more stronger version, in fact the strongest version, which we have authentic reports about, and this is the standard interpretation of Ibn Kathir and even Ibn Sa'd before him, and this is the mainstream Sunni interpretation, which doesn't exonerate him, but it makes him much better than of the killers, was that Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr was of those who entered the room on that day, but he did not actually participate in the killing. And this is authentically narrated by a number of different reports, including 1 or 2 eyewitnesses to what is taking place, that when Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr came into the room and Uthman is there reading the Quran, because of his seniority in terms of lineage, he was considered to be one of the leaders. So he was of those who approached Uthman ibn Affan, and he was of those who held on to his beard. This is Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. And Uthman said to him, Ya ibn akhi, O son of my brother, O nephew, meaning your father and me, Ya ibn akhi, this is not your place, meaning you should not be here. You are not a part of this group. This is not your place. Had your father been here, he would never have approved of this. And when he said this to Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, it is said he felt so guilty that he immediately let go and he left the premises and was not there when the deed took place. Now, to be brutally honest, that doesn't make him innocent either. I mean, he's of the crowd, and before this he has been a part of the crowd, and he is of those who have been not kind to Uthman. And this does raise this issue, and we need to understand, and here's, I hope by now, those of you that have been with me from the beginning, you understand, it is actually a problem when we romanticize each and every human being of the past, and we make them into an angel. It's a problem because when we find out they're not angels, this actually affects our iman. It's actually better to be honest and say, you know what? He wasn't a Sahabi. And of the children of the Sahaba, many are righteous and many are not that righteous. And Shaykh Hussain ibn Taymiyyah, he says that Muhammad ibn Bakr was not of the elite of the Tabi'un. He's not a Sahabi. He's not of the elite of the Tabi'un. In fact, his son, Al-Qasim, ibn Muhammad and Abdurrahman ibn Qasim, his son is better than him, and his son was one of the famous 7 scholars of Medina, Fuqaha Sab'a, one of the great scholars of his time. So this is the grandson of Abu Bakr, was one of the senior scholars of his time. He was not a political figure at all. So the point being that, it's just best to acknowledge this was a time when, yes, the Sahaba had lots of children. Not all of their children turned out to be completely like their fathers. And the main point to recognize, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr was not a Sahabi. And whatever he did or didn't do, it has nothing to do with the Sahaba. He was a child of one of the best, in fact the best Sahabi, but being the child of the best doesn't mean you are the best. After all, we have in the Quran the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. The Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. Is anybody going to blame Prophet Nuh for anything? You cannot control everybody. And in fact, Abu Bakr didn't even give tarbiyah to him. And we don't even blame Ali radiallahu anh. It's not, you grow up and you become a man and you leave. And now he's not like living in the house of Ali anymore. He's a full-fledged man now. He's 36 years old now at this point in time. He's not as if he's a child living in the house of Ali. He's his own independent man. And he has made up his mind for whatever reason. And I have explained in 2-3 weeks ago that there were some Sahaba who were critical of some of the policies of Uthman, but they never joined the side of the killers of Uthman. And this is something that is very explicit in our tradition. Al-Hasan al-Basri, again back to the one who is one of the most authentic narrators and scholars alive, who's an eyewitness. Al-Hasan al-Basri was asked many years later, did any of the Sahaba participate in the killing of Uthman? Did any of the Sahaba participate in the killing of Uthman? And Al-Hasan al-Basri says, Hasha lillah, which is like astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. They were nothing but the scums and riffraffs. These were the ruffians. The people who killed Uthman had nothing to do with the Sahaba. That for us is the key point. And even Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, at least he wasn't there and did not participate at the end. What he did before, between him and Allah. But he was not there in the end, and he walked away from the room in embarrassment and shame and did not participate in the actual killing of Uthman ibn Affan. So Uthman ibn Affan was murdered on the 12th of Dhul Hijjah in the 35th year of the Hijrah, and immediately after his death the crowd fled helter-skelter, dispersed, and this would become the biggest thorn in Ali's Khilafah. What to do with the qatala of Uthman? Because how many are they? In the hundreds or maybe thousands. And not meaning the people in the room, but basically the people that were surrounding, the protesters. And how many tribes have they loyalties with? That's basically almost 1/3 of the ummah, if you look at the people's tribes. So to wage war against them is to wage war, a major civil war. And we'll get to it, I'm jumping the gun here. This became one of the biggest issues which actually caused the battle of Siffin, the battle of Jamal in particular, because even Aisha was demanding that you need to take action, and we'll get to the why Ali radiallahu anhu felt that this is not the time or place. You're going to have a huge civil war that it's perhaps best to move on now, and you cannot bring that many people to justice. In any case, this is as soon as the murder takes place, the crowd disperses and literally scatters back and flees back to their lands. They're no longer in Medina after this. They're not going to wait for them to be captured. And Uthman ibn Affan, the janazah was prayed over his body in his own house. They felt that it's safe not to take him to the masjid, but to pray janazah in his own house. And janazah was prayed, and within a day or two, some people say 2 days after, Uthman ibn Affan was then taken at night so that nobody is going to see, just in case somebody's following or whatnot. And he was buried in a garden behind Baqi' al-Gharqad, behind Baqi'. And that is why today, if you go to Baqi', which has been expanded double, triple the amount that it was, you will go to the very end, and they say that is where the body of Uthman radiallahu anhu is. And Allah knows best. I mean, it appears to be, this is what history tells us. You cannot verify, you cannot negate or deny. This is what has been inherited from thousands, hundreds and thousands of years, that's where the body of Uthman is. Uthman radiallahu anhu was not buried in Baqi' because they were worried that these same people are going to dig up the grave and mutilate the corpse. He was buried in a secret location in one of the gardens of Medina that was behind Baqi'. And it is said later on that was then finally, when it calmed down, people who knew, and that was then kept being handed down, that this is the grave of Uthman. Until now, to this day, when you go to Baqi', those of you that have been, you know that all of the Sahaba are buried within the first 50 meters of Baqi'. Every one of them. And to go to Uthman's grave, you have to walk another like 10 minutes. Because that's at the very end of Baqi'. Because it was expanded and it wasn't inside Baqi' when he was buried over there. And the death of Uthman radiallahu anhu brought about not only political chaos, but theological. For the first time, the ummah split up on theological grounds. And two firqas formed at the death of Uthman. Two firqas, the kernels formed. They would come to fruition in the time of Ali. But at the death of Uthman radiallahu anhu is when the seeds are planted. The first of them are the Khawarij, and the second of them are the Shia. This is again from our perspective. The other groups have their version of events. From us, it's very clear that the death of Uthman radiallahu anhu caused two groups, their seeds to be planted. The first are the Khawarij. And as one of the Tabi'un said, that رَأَيْتُ قَتَلَةَ عُثْمَانَ, I saw the people who killed Uthman. Most of them were amongst the people of Nahawand. The people of Nahawand were the Khawarij. Most of them joined up or they became the Khawarij. So these very people who are political agitators at the time, and you know this is the reality of politics, once you enter it, it's in your blood. Once you get involved in siyasa and whatnot, you are always into it. So it's impossible to imagine these people who have done so much and marched from the various lands and killed Uthman, they're not just going to go home and live normal lives. It's not going to happen. These were the same people who then eventually broke away from Muawiyah and Ali radiallahu anhum and fought the both of them and formed a new firqa. And we already said 2 weeks ago, many of the signs of the Khawarij, we find them in the qatl of Uthman. Their assumption they know the Quran better. They quote the Quran against the Muslims where it was revealed for the Quraysh of Mecca. These are standard practices of the Khawarij and of radical terror, whatever groups to this day. And this is the reality that we see over here. So this is the first group. And the second group is of course the exact opposite. And they are those who view Ali radiallahu anh as being greater than he actually is, as being divinely appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as being infallible, etc., etc., etc. So these two groups were formed at the death of Uthman. And from our perspective, to summarize, and I have to do some more points before we conclude, from our perspective, what is important to note is that none of the Sahaba approved of the death of Uthman, much less participated in his killing. This is non-negotiable for us. And we can clearly say without sugarcoating, this is the reality that we find throughout all of our textbooks. No problems whatsoever. Now obviously there is an alternative narrative in other groups' textbooks. Because history is also depending on what version of theology you follow. And other history books written obviously after ours, Al-Mas'udi for example was written in 300 something, and we have Ibn Sa'd and others written in the 200s of the Hijrah. Our history books are the earliest, obviously, and understandably. Their history books go back to 300, 400, 500 Hijrah. We have history books predating in the second and the century of the Hijrah. Their history books mention somewhat bizarre events, and in fact the reality is, without critiquing them, you know, to an emotional level, but being as academic as possible, you actually find their history books seem to grow legends as time progresses, and they seem to find more and more information as time goes on. And of their version of events, they falsely accuse Aisha radiallahu anha of being of the instigators of Uthman's death. Now pause here. Do they love Aisha? No. So why do they bring this in? To show that there was major friction between the Sahaba. And because Aisha is now going to obviously become somebody that they don't like because of Ali radiallahu anh, and so they bring her in. But this is of course ludicrous, because less than 2 years later, Aisha will be the one demanding justice for the killers of Uthman. And she will go out and meet Ali radiallahu anh, as we know what's going to happen in the Battle of the Camel. So the claim that she was happy at the killing of Uthman is ludicrous. To say that she was the one who instigated does not make any sense whatsoever. So we say this is simply ridiculous. It's not found in our narratives. And of course, they also say that Ali himself radiallahu anh was, as far as I know, they do not say he was of those who killed Uthman. Even they would not be able to lie such a blatant lie. But they say that he was happy at the death of Uthman, that he wanted this because he wasn't basically an admirer of Uthman. But from our perspective, we have mutawatir reports, really beyond count. We have numerous reports that Ali was of the main defenders of Uthman, and especially even more than Ali was Ali's son Hassan. And in fact, in some reports, multiple times Ali radiallahu anh himself sent Hassan and Hussein throughout these 30-40 days with supplies, with the demand. And in fact, towards the end, it was Al-Hassan who was in the room Friday morning, and Uthman had to literally kick him out. Al-Hassan ibn Ali was in the room Friday morning on the day of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Uthman ibn Affan's death, to show that what? That he is on the side of Uthman. So this claim that Al-Hasan as well was Ali was happy at the death of Uthman, it makes no sense whatsoever. And out of all of the people who defended Uthman ibn Affan, 3 names come up again and again and again: Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar, and Al-Hasan ibn Ali. These were the 3 people that, and there were more, by the way. I mean, Abu Huraira, at a 60-year-old man, and he's now this. I mean, multiple people not just him, but I'm saying these 3 were the young men who, to the very end, wanted to defend Uthman ibn Affan. And the final name that we'll mention that is quoted over and over again by that group is Ammar ibn Yasir. That they say that Ammar ibn Yasir was also of those who reveled in the killing of Uthman ibn Affan and perhaps even participated. And we say this is a bold-faced lie. That they have taken something very trivial, and I talked about this a few weeks ago. The whole incident of Ammar, remember? We talked about it, right? Remember that? Minor thing happened, and I'm not going to sugarcoat. Ammar ibn Yasir wasn't the biggest fan of Uthman ibn Affan in terms of his policies. But this does not mean that he was at all on the side of the ruffians. And this is something that's very obvious. We all know you can dislike, let's say, any politician, any or even your CEO, let's say, of your company. You can criticize certain policies. Doesn't mean you're going to want to have somebody murdered. I mean, there's a huge difference between the two, right? And for this group to take those incidents and then blow them out of proportion, really, it's absolutely ludicrous. The final point, which is really very long and convoluted, but I will not go down into this whole path. There is this theory that there is this persona by the name of Abdullah ibn Saba. Abdullah ibn Saba. And Abdullah ibn Saba requires an entire academic lecture, which is going to be very boring for most people, and it's just not worth it to go into. Let's just say that he is a figure that is alleged to have existed, and many Sunni historians view him to be the real founder of Shi'ism. They say he was the one who began some of these doctrines of Ali being superhuman and Ali being this and Ali being that. And there is a theory that he was of those who also participated in the killing of Uthman ibn Affan. And and there are so many issues at stake here. Many of our medieval historians, they kind of liked to believe in these understandings of, oh, this one person began everything, and usually it's more complicated than this. It's not just one issue. And I just want you to be aware, I am fully aware of the whole controversy of Abdullah ibn Saba. I'm only quoting him now so that somebody won't say, oh, you forgot to mention, so and so, and you didn't talk about him. I find it a bit skeptical personally that Ibn Saba participated in the killing of Uthman ibn Affan. And as for his existence and his role in the formation of Shi'ism, that is a whole different topic altogether. And it's not related to the killing of Uthman. That's a whole different topic. And even if he existed, Shi'ism developed from multiple sources, not just one source. And it is not accurate to say the entire trend of Shi'ism goes back just to one person. That's simply not correct. Even if he existed, I'm not denying he existed, even if he existed, then certain things can be attributed to him, but the trend of Shi'ism is beyond one person. And there were many factors at play, and perhaps this person might have added some factors, but he definitely is not the source of the entire trend. And I do not believe that he had anything to do with the killing of Uthman ibn Affan because it's predating him. He will come, if he does come, a few years after this. So just wanted to put that as a footnote so that nobody can say that, oh, I was not aware of this. I know, I have read enough to know that I have an opinion about the issue, and that is that I don't think he's a part of the story, which is why I didn't make him a part of the story. I just wanted to put that footnote there in the end. And with that, we only have one lesson left about Uthman ibn Affan, and that is the ahadith that he narrated. The ahadith that he narrated, we'll take a selection. He has a lot of ahadith, more than Abu Bakr and Umar. Obviously, why? Because he lived much longer, and he lived at a time of peace the first 6 years, and he's narrating throughout his life, and he dies the oldest, 82. He is the oldest of the four khulafa to die. So inshallah ta'ala, we will have the halaqah, but next week I will be out of town, so we will take a break. It's a spring break for us. I'll be out of town. Inshallah, the week after that, 2 weeks from now, we will do the ahadith of Uthman ibn Affan.